From Music City, USA, it's David Hooper and Music Business Radio.
From the Tuned In Broadcasting Studios in Nashville, Tennessee, this is Music Business Radio, your backstage pass to the music business. My guest today, one of the most innovative writers and exciting performers in rock music. He's the voice of Jethro Tull, Ian Anderson. Ian, welcome to Music Business Radio.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
So I've got to ask you about the Jethro Tull name. What I heard is that it was your agent, your booking agent, that came up with that name.
It was indeed, yes. We had a different name every week when we first started because we were so atrocious that the only way we could get rebooked into any of the clubs was to change our name every week and pretend to be somebody different. And it was, I think, our third, maybe even our fourth visit to the famous Marquee Club in London when we finally met with some level of acceptance from both the audience and the management of the club. And so we had to stick with the name we had that week, which just happened to be Jethro Tull. If it had been the week before, it would have been Navy Blue. If it had been the week before that, we were called the Ian Henderson's Bag of Blues. And the week before that, we were called something else. It was ridiculous, you know. But that was the watershed moment. 11th of February, 1968, that's when Jethro Tull became known as Jethro Tull.
And that's when it finally stuck.
That's when it finally stuck, and frankly, I would have been quite happy to let it drift on another week, because Jethro Tull isn't much better than the previous ones.
So what did the guy say when you just showed up? It's the same guys, just a different name. Was that noticeable?
I often used to say, yes, I think you had my brother's band here a couple of weeks ago, and God, aren't they awful? What made you book them?
So how long did it take before things really took off? Can you tell me about the first record deal, and did you get label interest right away, or did you actually have to go and pursue a record deal?
Well, I think you always have to pursue them. Various people were wheeled into the Marquee Club after we'd been playing there for 2 or 3 months. And it was the usual story, really. I mean, most of them just said politely no. One famous record company owner, I think his name was Mike Vernon, said, quote, "not in a million years," basically because he thought that the flute was an entirely unsuitable instrument to have in what was essentially a little blues band at the time. So he just didn't get it. He was the producer of people like Fleetwood Mac and so on in the early days. So he was one of the people that you really wanted to impress, and he remained entirely unimpressed. And it wasn't until, I think, about July that in some degree of desperation, our manager's father borrowed some money from his local small-town bank, and armed with today's equivalent of a couple of $1,000s, we went into a little studio in London and made our first album, you know, as a private venture, and then hawked it around a few record companies, and Island Records picked it up, and a little later, Reprise, a division of Warner Brothers, picked it up for the USA. So we kind of took the risk, and it's been that pattern actually all the way through. I've always made records, you see, as a record producer, a musician, and a writer. You know, I make the records, and then I see if somebody wants to release them, and that's the way it's always been. We deliver them one at a time, no long-term arrangements, no long-term commitments. And that seems to work because we've been with Chrysalis Records since the very beginning, and that was then purchased by EMI Records. And so we're with EMI to this day in terms of the last release a few months ago. And EMI, of course, is about to be gobbled up by Universal. So what the new masters at Universal make of us remains to be seen. But I'm at the end of my professional career anyway, so frankly, I don't give a damn, as they say.
This is Music Business Radio. My guest today is Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull. I have to say that was very innovative of you to take the risk. That's what a lot of independent artists are doing now.
Yeah,
they produce it themselves.
I think it's a necessity these days because major record company deals are of dubious value anyway, because no record company can afford to just cut a simple record deal like you would have done 20, let alone 40 years ago. These days, in order to try and get a piece of the action, just like American Airlines and Delta want their $25, $35 baggage charge out of you because the old model doesn't work. Whereas Southwest Airlines, you get free baggage because their model, derived in more recent years, does work and is much more efficient. Same thing with the record company business these days. The old-timers, the old what will soon be the three majors, they can't afford to stay in business unless they have what they call 365-degree deals, which means they want a piece of everything. They have to find other income streams, just like a major airline has to find other income streams that before it didn't have to worry about. Now it's got to charge you for everything. And in the same way, a record company needs to get a piece of everything in order to survive with their very large overheads and their actually greater costs of marketing and promotion. You know, we assume that in today's internet world, you make a little record at home and it just kind of goes out viral on the internet and you become a major star. Well, maybe that happens 1 in 100,000 or 200,000 times. Maybe somebody gets successful just through the internet. But for the other, 199,000 people, it's just not going to happen. You know, they're just going to remain unseen, unheard, very small fish in a very, very large pool. So marketing and promotion is just as important today as it was 20 or 40 years ago. And marketing and promotion today is spread not just through the traditional print media or a bit of radio or occasional television, but across a plethora of platforms that are these days, everything from the social media, which are used by every major corporation, has a Twitter account and a Facebook account because it's just an extension of marketing. It's a way of reaching out to people using social media. And arguably the value of social media is greater as a professional marketing tool for big corporations than it is for the idle chatter and desperate loneliness of a lot of individuals who actually spend hours of their day using such media in a way that, frankly, I can't fathom. I mean, I have Twitter accounts and Facebook accounts, but it's business only.
Right,
the minute I ever communicate to anybody personally on Twitter or Facebook, you can shoot me.
Well, when it comes to marketing, I think what you're getting at is there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of media outlets out there. There are also more bands these days. So how can a band stick out? I mean, like you had the flute, obviously, that was very innovative and still is.
Yes, well, it still sticks out, yeah. And yes, I'm glad to see you. There is a flute in my pocket, you're quite right. It's one of those things that, if you have a point of difference in marketing terms, sorry to make this sound so business-oriented.
No, this is music business radio, so feel free.
But I'm supposed to be a creative soul and not care about these things. But for me, matching the pragmatic approach to making music is an important match of the practical, the reality of the world, and the creative juices that hopefully flow and flow in a relatively unabandoned way when you've taken care of business. And the reason I got involved in the business side of it from the very beginning is because I felt if I was going to have a reasonably stress-free life, it had to be that I knew that business was taken care of because I was the guy that did it. And if you leave this up to other people, managers, agents, and God forbid, tour managers, they just create work for themselves, and they create ultimately more stress for people like me who then don't know what we're supposed to be doing. So, yes, I have an agent in the USA, and I have a lady who does, kind of press and promo stuff in the USA as well as the record company people, but day to day, I mean, most of the decisions that have to be made, it's easier if I make them. And when I'm traveling and touring, it's obviously a little difficult, but my day a week when I do have some time in a hotel room with a working internet connection is when I try and get the week's work done in a few hours.
So you're very hands-on. Can you talk about your typical day and what that's like? Because right now you're in the middle of a United States tour. Yeah,
well, a typical day means waking up about 7 in the morning and usually starting traveling around 8 or latest 9, because on tour in most places I will travel during the morning, try to be where I've got to be by lunchtime. So we're usually talking about a radius of 200, maybe 250 miles at a push by road between concerts. Or I have to fly, and flying day of the show is increasingly risky because these days airlines, as you know, have to fly full.
Right.
In fact, they mostly have to fly oversold, which means if something goes wrong with a cancellation, which of course affected Washington, Baltimore, New York yesterday, big time, there are no backup flights, or there might appear to be on paper, but if you show up at them, you're going to be somewhere at the back of a very long standby queue, and you probably are not going to get to where you have to go that day. So it's a big risk these days, traveling by air, day of show, I really try to avoid at all costs. You know, flying on days off, on the long days, otherwise it's driving in the morning, because I'm not a bus guy. I can't sleep in a moving vehicle, so band and crew travel by bus, and I don't. But these days, with the benefit of an internet dongle, then I can usually get a bit of a connection, so I'm able to work a little bit in the car, since someone is driving me. Then that's my office for an hour or two, and then check in a hotel, unpack, get some lunch, check the emails, try and do a little something before I go off to sound check around 4 o'clock, and then sound check is a daily ritual, which I insist on being at in full, because it's not just about the ritual of making sure everything is okay technically, but you know, quite often there are little refinements to the show or things you have to run over and rehearse again that maybe have slipped out of the performance standard. And so we all have, I think most days there's probably a need for somebody in the band to say, do you mind if we just go over this 6 bars here? I have a little problem here. So we try and do that every day. And then the inevitable signing things, meet and greets, and goodness knows whatever goes on apart from actually playing a concert which is 2.5 hours from beginning to end.
This is Music Business Radio. My guest today is Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull. I had the Doobie Brothers in, and he had a great quote. He said, you know, you're not paying me for the 1 hour on stage. You're paying me for the other 23 hours of the day. And there is a lot of work in that 23 hours a day, isn't there?
Well, there's a lot of work for anybody, whether they're doing what I do or whether they're just starting off in the world of music, trying to be a professional musician or entertainer. There's a lot of work and dedication involved, and the sad reality is that people like me, my era of musicians, you know, we were more than adequately paid for our 23 hours work, or in reality it's probably more like 12 hours of work a day. We did pretty well when record royalties really meant something, and these days it's a whole different world, because the chances of young musicians getting paid for their endeavors are pretty minuscule, because we live in a world where the likelihood is you're not actually going to shift very many physical copies of a CD. I mean, you're probably going to get ripped off on the internet by a generation of people whose view on the matter is, well, it's out there, just take it. Why would I want to pay? Why do I want to buy it from iTunes or Amazon if I can get it for free? Why do I actually really want to go to a concert when I can see last night's performance on YouTube, which is the reality most of the time for most acts these days, that it's your concert is going to be maybe in pieces, but a lot of it is visible a few hours later on YouTube. I mean, I've done shows when I'm back in my hotel room straight after a show, get online and someone's posted something already. You know, it's a game that they play to see who can post something before the other guys. And it's, you know, I accept that that's part of the world we live in, and it doesn't upset me hugely because I've done very nicely in the past. And it upsets me for the generation of musicians now, many of whom write to me saying, what do we do? And I have to say, listen, get a day job, because the chances of you being able to emulate the kind of success that was a possibility, slim, but nonetheless a possibility, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, that's diminished now to a tiny, tiny, infinitesimally small chance of actually ever making any money out of it. It's not to say you shouldn't have the dream, you shouldn't go for it, but I think the reality of the old adage, don't give up your day job, is ever more true today than it was in my time, when I think my mother said that to me at some point when I was wanting to become a musician. Yeah,
it is a dream for a lot of people. You're listening to Music Business Radio. Ian Anderson is my guest today. More from Ian when we come back on Music Business Radio.
In the shuffling madness of the locomotive breath runs the all-time loser, headlong to his death. Oh, it feels the piston scraping, steam breaking on his brow. Oh, Charlie stole the handle, and the train it won't stop going. No, it could slow down. children jumping off the stations one by one. His woman and his best friend in bed and having fun. Oh, he's crawling down the corridor on his hands and knees. Oh, Charlie stole the handle, and the train it won't stop going. No, it should slow down. Yeah.
This is Emmylou Harris, and you're listening to Music Business Radio, your backstage pass to the biz.
I Am Festival, Saturday, August 3rd at Bicentennial Mall, where live music, craft beer, food, and active lifestyles unite. Music by Mute Man, The Wigs,
Waiting more than I can handle.
Flowbots,
I can ride my bike with no handlebars, no handlebars, no handlebars.
Nappy Roots,
In the hood showing love, so I'm A-OK. Hey.
and it doesn't stop there. Space Capone, MNDR, Chancellor Warhol, and MoDOK. Tickets are just $35, and the show starts at noon with a healthy living expo, bicycle racing, zip line, kids zone, and lots more family fun. Join Lightning 100 on August 3rd at I Am Festival at the Bicentennial Mall. For info and concert tickets, go to imfestival.org. Presented by I Am the Engine.
254624.
Hi, this is Lee Lockman from Chicago, and you're listening to Music Business Radio.
You're listening to Music Business Radio. I'm David Hooper, your host, and with me today, Ian Anderson, the voice of Jethro Tull. You sort of answered this next question that I'm going to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyway, because you've been in the business for 40 years. Is it a good time or a bad time for the music business right now?
Well, I mean, there's always some good comes out of everything that's bad, but I don't really see there being any huge light at the end of this particular tunnel, because I don't think the world is ever going to go back to the degree of purchase of music, at least recorded music, that was the case up until 10, 15 years ago. I don't think those days will ever come back. I think that the chances of making money as a songwriter, as a working musician, it's mainly going to be favoring those who have a strong presence in the live performance market. That's not something that is going to be replaceable in the near or distant future. I think people always are going to enjoy the being in the same room with something happening and sharing that experience with a lot of other people. So live performance is clearly the mainstay of the music business now. And as long as some dribs and drabs find their way through the collection societies to the songwriters, then income will be forthcoming. But, of course, once you have records falling out of copyright, recorded copyright, the incentive to pay mechanical royalties disappears as well, and everything becomes a car boot sale. It's out there. Nobody pays royalties. Nobody pays tax. And, I spent some time campaigning on behalf of the British music industry with our then Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, to try and persuade him that it was time to try and extend our copyright laws, because we only had a period of 50 years protection on recorded copyright. All to no avail, because he wasn't interested and just felt that copyright was something that didn't really matter. And he's wrong, because it's not just about lining the pockets of Paul McCartney or others who have made tons of money in the past. Is protecting the recorded copyright for the sake of those musicians who maybe only ever had one half hit, and it's their retirement money we're talking about here. It's also about the 9/10 of the industry iceberg, which lies well below the visible surface.
Right.
And it's about spinning money out across many layers of employment. It's also about taxable income, so it's creating money for the exchequer, in our case, or your federal reserves, such as they might be. I think you have to be prepared to pay for what you get in this life, and music is a commodity that deserves paying for, just like a loaf of bread or a pint of milk. If you want to buy it, you're not forced to buy it, but if you want to buy it, you should be prepared to pay for it, and that creates tax, which helps pay for health services, education, transport, the systems that are the very lifeblood of our nations. And if we're not prepared to pay tax and pay for what we consume, then I think we do have a bleak scenario for particularly young, aspiring musicians today.
This is Music Business Radio. My guest today is Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull. You mentioned that, I guess part of the business model is the live show, guys going out and doing it live, since music is being, let's say, copied or downloaded. I'd love to talk to you about your live show. You have a lot of grand movements in the show. Do you have any advice for artists that would like to be more visually entertaining on stage?
I was asked that question last night, not last night, the night before, by a young flautist who wanted to play, or does play, flute in some kind of rock-ish band, wanting advice about presentation and communicating to the audience. And I said, well, the only advice I can give you is be you and just turn the wick up a little bit. But if you set out to try and choreograph your every movement, or to try to perform in a way that you're being advised by somebody else who wants to turn you into something you're not, then it probably isn't going to be believable. And so I think the first and only advice has to be yourself, but just make yourself a little bigger and brighter than the one that goes shopping at the local supermarket or drops the kids off at school in the morning. Just burn a little brighter, but be you. Don't try to be somebody else. And if you happen to be an unbelievably boring and dreary person, well, just forget it and go back to the day job. Tough advice, but it's the only one I can offer.
Well, there's definitely a lot of trusting yourself in there. If you're going to be on stage, you have to trust those movements, because, like you said, people are going to they know what's real, right?
Well, I think they do, especially an American audience. They don't buy phonies. And I was asked just a few years ago, by the manager of our venerable, long-standing pop star Cliff Richard, or Sir Cliff Richard as he is, who has, like many British singers, dreamed of making it in America and never really has. And in his desperation, having tried most of the things he possibly could to be accepted in America, being huge in the UK and various other ex-colonies like Australia, but not in America, he'd tried everything. And I said, well, maybe his Christian beliefs might be directed to perhaps doing a gospel album or something that would appeal to the Christian underbelly of North America. And his manager said, well, actually, we tried that back in 1983, and it didn't work then. I mean, basically, he tried everything, every trick in the book, even more recently coming to Nashville to record a Cliff Richard album in Nashville using Nashville session musicians.
Yeah.
This would somehow, create this magic sense of, oh, wow, he's one of us, really. We love him after all. But, that's just not going to happen, because you are going to see poor old Sir Cliff as the phony that he is when it comes to trying to achieve credibility with an American public who are very quick to spot phonies. Robbie Williams of Take That, another example, desperate to make it in America. Forget it. He is, to you guys, he's a phony.
Yeah.
He's a nice enough phony. He's an okay singer. He's got a cheery, chirpy personality, but he's so, he wears that desperation on his sleeve, and it scares you. You want to get away from it because he wants it too badly. And people who want it too badly don't make it, whereas people like Led Zeppelin, when they charged over here as plundering Norsemen, stealing your sheep and your women, they frankly didn't give a... you can imagine the word. They didn't really give a. They just didn't care whether you liked them or you didn't. They were just coming here because they wanted to have a good time, and frankly, it didn't matter whether you loved them or loathed them. And that's the sort of approach usually that conveys itself in a way that makes you loved and appeals to people. So somehow the reverse is often true. The wanting it too badly is often a recipe for disaster. Not really caring too much, somehow luck comes your way. against the odds. But I think going back to your point, you've got to have self-belief. If you're going to aspire to be a musician today, you've got to have self-belief. You've got to have some level of confidence. But I would always say temper that with the reality. Listen to what people have to say. Don't necessarily take it all to heart, but at least listen to it. At least let people have the opportunity to criticize you. If you grow a thick enough skin quickly enough, it won't hurt you, but it may still sometimes point out to you things that you're doing wrongly. So, listen to criticism. Don't have so much self-belief that you are blind in your endeavor. The pain will only be that much worse when you finally realize that that you're going to have to pump gas or stack shelves in the supermarket for a living. Have self-belief, but temper it with a bit of reality and be prepared for the possibility that it isn't going to go the way that you hope. You've got to be confident when you walk on stage. However, be prepared to cry yourself to sleep most nights of the week.
This is Music Business Radio. My guest today is Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull. How do you balance having a vision and knowing what you want, but being open to criticism?
Well, I think you balance it by just in the same way as you balance your friendships with people, your relationship with your parents, the relationship with people around you. You have to accept that sometimes things are not always good in those relationships, but once in a while, you benefit from the harshest of criticism or the snappiest of words aimed in your general direction by an irate father because you didn't make it home to bed in time last night, or whatever the case may be. You've got to have a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of understanding of people. But when you set out on any course into the wide world and the harsh reality of that wide world, it's balancing self-belief, confidence, enthusiasm above all for whatever it is you've set out to do in your life. But just be prepared for some knocks along the way, and be prepared for some harsh criticism, whether it's from your boss, your friends, your family. Learn to take criticism. It's something that we all have to do in life. And I rather think if you learn to do that as a teenager, to accept a little criticism, take it with the often good nature with which it's intended. Don't always react by fighting back or being, contentious. Just accept sometimes that there maybe is a good reason for being criticized, and learn to do that when you're a teenager, because by the time you're in your 20s, should you meet the girl of your dreams, then you really do need to know how to accept criticism if you're going to endure a happy and long marriage. And that's one of the keys really to anything, is I think if you can learn to live with people, you're far better able to live with your work and balance your own self-esteem with the need to be real about your own failings. I mean, there's not a night I come off stage when I can't remember vividly every wrong note I played. And I have to address that issue, because there's going to be a few stinkers every night. You might not notice them, but I do.
Right.
And probably some of the band notice too. And that happens to me every night. I have to come off stage and think with a sense of almost humiliation, I really messed that up tonight, and try and address the problem. So,
well, you mentioned going into sound check too. I mean, you're trying to prepare before the gig and you're looking at it after the gig. So it leads to better gigs.
Well, I think so. And I think one of the things not to do is to have an enormous post-mortem after a show where people get into a room and start tearing everything apart and criticizing each other, because that does lead to band feuds. I always remember hearing, a couple of bands that used to do that were bands that we worked with in early days, that you would hear them come off stage and as we were getting ready to go on, I mean, you couldn't help but hear through the thin walls of dressing rooms the screaming, shouting, accusatory dialogue going on from the room next door, and that doesn't really help, I don't think. I think you've got to let a few, criticize yourself first, privately, in your own mind, and then maybe chat to the other guys about it in the light of tomorrow.
And I wonder if those bands are still together, if you could maintain a relationship.
Well, the two bands that I'm thinking of most definitely are not together now.
Right.
One called Curved Air and the other called Gentle Giant.
So you
both great bands of that early kind of prog rock era, with great musicians and great personalities, but their problem was they would just tear each other to pieces every night as soon as they came off stage. And I think the relationships foundered pretty early on.
Ian Anderson is my guest today on Music Business Radio. Let's take a listen to part of Thick as a Brick, which is the album he's currently performing on tour. More from Ian Anderson when we come back on Music Business Radio.
Really don't mind if you sit this one out. My words but a whisper, your deafness a shout. I may make you feel, but I can't make you think. Your sperm's in the gutter, your love's in the sink. So you ride yourselves over the fields, and you make all your animal deals, and your wise men don't know how it feels to be thick as a brick. And the sandcastle virtues are all swept away in the tidal destruction, the moral malaise. The elastic retreat rings the close of play as the last wave uncovers the newfangled way. But your new shoes are worn at the heels, and your suntans rapidly reel, and your wise men don't know how it feels to be thick as a brick.
Hi, this is John Hyatt, and you're listening to Music Business Radio, your backstage pass to the biz.
Singing along to the wrong song.
Looking forward to the weekend, a chance to let loose, drink some craft beers, eat great food, maybe play a little cornhole? Well, who says you need to wait until the weekend? Come join Lightning 100 at Fat Bottom Brewing Company every Wednesday for the best cornhole league in town. Get your team together and battle for weekly prizes. While yours truly, Wells Adams, spins awesome local music from the 615. Bands like The Gills. Sign up starts at 5 p.m. and the game starts at 6. And with the grand prize going to the team with the most wins on August 21st, this is one event you don't want to miss. Brought to you by Nashville Vapor at 5908 Charlotte Pike. Details Nashville, wedding and event services, Center Street Recording Studio, Music City Handymen, their service makes you sing, and The Car Guy, Nashville's mobile mechanic, and powered by Lightning 100. Parties aren't just for the weekend anymore. Cornhole and craft beer at Fat Bottom Brewing Company in East Nashville every Wednesday at 5 p.m.
But it's you I fell into.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dave Grohl of the Foo Fighters. You're listening to Music Business Radio.
This is Music Business Radio from Nashville, Tennessee. I'm David Hooper, your host, and with me today, the voice of Jethro Tull, Ian Anderson. You've kept it together and moving forward for 40 years. What's the secret?
Well, I mean, when we say keep it together, we have to remember Jethro Tull is something of a revolving door of great and interesting characters and musicians, and I think we're up to about 28 people who've been members of Jethro Tull over the years, and it's like a big family, and I think apart from a couple that are no longer with us, you know, I'm in pretty much regular contact with all of those people, and like to think that I have a pretty good relationship with all of them. They don't necessarily all have a great relationship with each other, but with me, they do. Well, I suppose they have to, because they still rely on my office to pay them their royalty checks twice a year. Maybe they hold me in high, if not dubious, esteem for that reason alone. But no, we get on all right. I mean, I think I know when I meet ex-band members, you know, that if we look each other in the eye, I think it has to do with a lot more than royalty checks. It has to do with the bond that you form that stays there forever, even if musically you've parted ways. I like being in that kind of a band. It's part of a big ensemble of very different people, all who brought their individual talents and skills and personalities to what I have been involved in over all these years. But in some ways, I suppose I'm a bit of a classic band leader in the Frank Zappa or John Mayall mold. But I try to be as benign as I can be as a band leader and not disintegrate to the band leader in the sense of a James Brown, who was a notoriously, well, I mean, I shouldn't talk about someone who's no longer with us, and this would be second-hand commentary, but he was said to be a bit of a tyrant, to put it mildly, and most of the time not really a very nice person to his musicians. And
right.
And that you don't have to do. You don't have to be mean to people. You're a team. And I think you're an effective team when you have a team leader, a team captain. But he's got to be part of the team. You all depend on each other. You're like a squad of infantrymen on patrol in Afghanistan. You depend on each other to look out for each other.
Right.
You actually have to, if you're not going to step on an IED, you need someone to be looking out for you. And it's a little bit like that on stage. Obviously, not a great parallel, but it feels like life and death sometimes on a stage when you're out there in front of a lot of people, and you depend on each other to be supportive. And if somebody loses their way, which does happen, especially in highly arranged and sometimes complex music, then you've got to be there to be kind of just pointing them in the right direction. And that is something that I think is the result of a lot of little kind of eye movements, hand signals, little facial gestures, just stuff that we recognize from each other as little cues and helps, and we all do it, and we'd all depend on each other for maintenance, ultimately, of some degree of self-esteem, because we all mess up every night. I mean, no one has a flawless performance. It doesn't exist. I mean, I know tonight I am going to play probably 2 or 3, for me, horribly wrong notes. I'm just going to have that little slip.
I think there's something kind of cool about that, though. It shows that it's real. It's not perfect, but it's authentic. To take it back to the authentic.
The problem is when it's the same 2 or 3 notes every night, then you've got a problem. If the same thing goes wrong night after night. And that's what I'm saying about sound check. If you make a mistake and it's just a one-off little thing in one passage of music, then you try and sort it out in your own mind. But if it's happened 2 or 3 times, if things are a little unsteady, or there's some little ensemble passage that's getting a little unglued, then you have to be able to address it. And every so often, that happens, which means there's not a sound check goes by, I don't think, without us as a band just covering some little thing that we need to just clarify in everybody's mind again. This is how we want to play it. Or maybe that instead of doing it the way we have played it for the last 50 shows, we actually have a better idea. And that isn't just necessarily musical notation. It could also be just in terms of the show, in terms of visual stuff, in terms of presentation, in terms of where you are on the stage and where a lighting cue picks you up, and where it's lots of things, not just the musical notes.
This is Music Business Radio. My guest today is Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull. When you're putting together a show or an album, I mean, obviously when I say Jethro Tull to somebody, that means something to them. They expect something. And how do you balance what people expect with your innovation as a musician?
Well, that depends. If it says Jethro Tull on the ticket, the expectations are going to be that it is the best of Jethro Tull. It's a generic Jethro Tull concert when you're going to hear the songs that perhaps are most widely associated with the band's history. That's what the obligation is for me, following that expectation of the audience, which is why when I'm doing something that's a bit more project-related, whether it's a Christmas concert in a cathedral, or a orchestral tour, or with a string quartet, or it's an acoustic tour, or whatever, if it's more of a project-related thing, like these Thick as a Brick concerts are at the moment, then I use my own name, and I try and not just make it say Jethro Tull on the ticket, because I want people to begin to have the feeling they've got to examine this a little more closely before they buy a ticket and then get disappointed because they're not just going to hear 20 best-known Jethro Tull songs. But then I'm a musician and have a history of being able to get away with it. So I suppose there aren't many musicians or bands around who would risk doing what I do, which is to go out and play 2 albums of fairly complex music back-to-back, music that is generally termed as progressive rock or prog rock. To do that in the year 2012, it seems a little suicidal. And I'm happily one of the few that can get away with that, because I think the audience do understand that that's what they're getting, and I don't get a rough ride because of it. I mean, twice in how many shows? 50, 60 shows now we've been doing of the Thick as a Brick tour. I think on 2 occasions I've heard somebody shout out, Aqualung, and it's just the one guy who's drunk. But that's twice in all those shows. Other than that, people understand this is something that is not a generic rock show. It is musical theatre. And I do advise them, especially if they're of the older demographic, which they tend to be in the USA and the UK, it's probably a good idea to bring a cushion to sit on and some strong black coffee, because this is a long movie.
Ian Anderson is my guest today on Music Business Radio, and here's one that you won't hear on the current tour. This is Aqualung by Jethro Tull on Music Business Radio.
Sitting on the park bench, eyeing little girls with bad intent. Snot's running down his nose, greasy fingers smearing shabby clothes. Hey, Aqualung, drying in the cold sun, watching as the pretty panties run. Hey, Aqualung, feeling like a dead duck, spitting out pieces of his broken love. Oh, Aqualung, sun streaking cold, an old man wandering lonely, taking time the only way he knows. Their curtain bed as it bends to pick a dog end, it goes down to the bark and warms his feet. Feeling alone, the armies of the road, salvation at the mood, and a cup of tea. Aqualung, my friend, don't just start away uneasy. You poor old sod, you see it's only me. Do you still remember a December's foggy freeze, when the ice that clings onto your beard was screaming agony? Hey, you snatch your rattling last breaths with deep sea diver sounds, and the flowers bloom like madness in the spring. Sun streaking cold, an old man wandering lonely, taking time the only way he knows. Leg hurting bad as he bends to pick a dog end, he goes down to the bark and warms his feet. Feeling alone, the armies of the road, salvation at a load, and a cup of tea. Aqualung, my friend, don't you start away uneasy. You poor old sod, you see it's only me. Oh, 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 oh. just start away uneasy. You poor old sod, you see it's only me. Sitting on the park bench, eyeing little girls with bad intent. Snot running down his nose, greasy fingers smearing shabby clothes. Hey, Aqualung, drying in the cold sun, watching as the frilly panties run. Hey, Aqualung, feeling like a dead duck, spitting out pieces of his broken luck. Hey, Aqualung.
Hi everybody, this is Rob Halford, the Metal God from Judas Priest, and you're listening to Music Business Radio.
Promise you'll be fine across the bridge, the lights of town. You smile and turn around.
Courtyard Hound's brand new album, Amelita, is available now at iTunes. Courtyard Hounds features Emily Robeson and Marty McGuire from the Dixie Chicks.
You've got the rest of your life. I take your hand, let's go tonight. Just leave it all, I promise you'll be.
Billboard magazine hailed Amelita as ritually arranged and sonically immaculate. Amelita by Courtyard Hounds is available now at iTunes. Courtyard Hounds' brand new album, Amelita, featuring Emily Robeson and Marty McGuire from the Dixie Chicks, is available at iTunes. Buy it now.
You've got the rest of your life.
Welcome back to Music Business Radio with your host, David Hooper.
This is Music Business Radio from Nashville, Tennessee. I'm David Hooper, your host, and with me today, the voice of Jethro Tull, Ian Anderson. How do you keep it up after all these years?
I assume you're not referring to my sexual prowess, but we can go there if you really want to. It's more a matter really of, I suppose, energy that comes from a mixture of enthusiasm and desperation. Because if you fall off the bicycle at my age, it's pretty difficult to get back on it again. And I think I've always had the attitude that the older I get, the more I have to try to keep the pressure going. You know, it's, I don't know for a fact, but if I'm pretty nervous, to put it mildly. If I took a year off, I don't think I would make it back to this level of either physical fitness or mental precision in terms of what I do. And so I practice a lot. You know, if I have a week off, because I do have a week off sometimes, I have a week off week after next week when I'm back in the UK before I set off for a month in Europe. And that week isn't a week off. For me, it's 2 days off, because the other 5 days before I jump on a train, actually, to go into Europe, I have to play a little every day in order to stay in shape. Then I have to, the last couple of days, I will rehearse the show that I've been playing now for months. I will rehearse it all the way through twice every day for the last 2 days, because I have to get sharp again. You have to really kind of get back to that level. But getting back to the level's not difficult after a week. After a month, it's tough. After a year, I would venture to say it would be getting close on impossible to drag me up to that level again. Because I'm 65, you know, and if I fall off the bike now, if I try to mount that bicycle and pedal off as fast as I have done before, I'm probably going to fall off immediately again. So that's my view: is keep going, keep at it.
Good advice.
And like the proverbial cowboy, you know, die with your boots on. If I snuff it one night on stage from a giant embolism or an aneurysm or cardiac arrest in some form, then it will it will be the preferred way to go.
Yeah.
And there's a few of us who've done it that way, who've gone out, if not at the peak of our careers, at least at a point where we were still professionals, standing on a stage, facing, as we call them, bums on seats, people's bottoms, sitting on the warm seats, having a concert hall full of people that what better way is there to go than standing there in front of your friends and getting the final round of applause as they drag you off on a stretcher.
Well, that's an incredible way to end the show. I've got one more question for you, though, because I think that this is fascinating. The first Jethro Tull album, This Way, you had only been playing flute just a few months, according to the liner notes.
Yeah, I started, really it was around the time, it was around January, February of 68 that I started playing the flute on stage, and at the time Jethro Tull became Jethro Tull, as I say, it was February of 1968, I was playing the flute probably only for 3 or 4 weeks, and by June or July we were recording our first album, so I guess it, was 4 or 5 months. But let's remember that, I played a little bit of guitar before that, so I just translated what I did on the guitar into finding those notes on the flute and doing the same sort of a thing. So I was playing the flute, but I was still thinking not very good guitar player.
Still, they're a totally different instrument, though, and I guess that's the final question is, how do you know when you're ready?
Well, I think the best learning you ever do is standing on a stage in front of an audience, because to quote the name of Frank Zappa's first band, the Mothers of Invention, necessity, as the old adage goes, is the mother of invention. And being on a stage, you learn quickly. I mean, you learn by your own mistakes, but just try to learn by those mistakes in not too conspicuous a way. So it often helps to start, in the lowest forms of public appearance, in little clubs or, wherever. Just make your mistakes relatively in private, and then by the time you've got on a bigger platform, hopefully you have really learned by the experience of performing. But I think to an extent, to sit and noodle away in your bedroom on your own until you think, right, now I'm a fully fledged musician, I can go out there and get on any stage and be brilliant, that's not good thinking. I think there's a danger that if you stay closeted too long and don't perform in public, that you won't actually, for a start, you'll just start endlessly doing the same old things over and over again. If you say closeted in your bedroom as a guitar player or a singer or a flute player, you just won't experience the wider world. And I think getting on a stage pretty much as soon as you feel able is the best thing you can do to learn, not just to play your instrument technically, but to learn to make it sing. Every instrument sings. It's an excuse for the human voice, really. I think we all recognize that even in the early Eric Clapton, he wasn't just another guitar slinger. He wasn't just another guy who'd learned a few licks by listening to, a few rock and rollers. He was someone that had some other kind of ability, and he did, just as the Peter Green in Fleetwood Mac, who was the original guitar player. He made his guitar sing like a human voice. It had the nuances, the subtleties, the shape, the expression that other guitar players didn't have. And I didn't have, which is why when I heard Eric Clapton, I resolved that this was not going to be the gig for me.
Right.
I was never going to be that good, so I'd better find something else I could try to make sing.
Take up the flute.
Yeah, so whilst I'm still a strummer to this day, and I play a lot of guitar, actually, in the shows we're doing now.
Yeah, you've done all right for yourself.
I know my limitations, and I use the guitar mainly as a songwriting tool, and then some parts of songs feel that I should continue with that into the live performance. I do play guitar quite a lot on stage, but I don't think, if you ask me what do, I say, well, I prefer to think of myself as a flute player, because I'm not a great singer. I'm certainly not a great guitar player. I'm not even a great flute player, but I'm a loud flute player. So
perfect for rock and roll.
Yeah, just about, yeah.
Well, that's it for me. I mean, do you have anything else that you want to add, that you want to get out to the music business or to upcoming musicians?
I do. My final words are probably the most important. They are, please take me back to my hotel. I've got a day's work to do before I play a concert tonight. But very, very nice to meet you. And
Ian, thank you so much for being here. Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull on Music Business Radio. Check us out online at musicbusinessradio.com. Ian, thank you.
Pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Music Business Radio, a production of Tuned In Broadcasting Incorporated, Nashville, Tennessee. Recorded in the WRLT Lightning 100 studios. Music Business Radio is produced by Gary Crane, David Hooper, and Dan Buckley. Special technical assistance by Tom Hansen. With Pro Tools post-production by Justin Hamill and Dan Buckley. And Lester said, don't help me. For information on syndication, guest booking, demo derby music, or downloading previous episodes, visit musicbusinessradio.com.
Music Business Radio.